Hello and welcome to the We Love Hitchin Interviews 2024. My name is Matt Porter, founder of the Facebook group We Love Hitchin, which has been running for 9 years and has a membership approaching 30,000. We're thrilled to be hosting today's event at Farley's Hitchin. A big shout out goes to Felix for stepping up as our host today. Felix is not only our host, but he also plays a big role and gives up a massive amount of time helping to run We Love Hitchin. So thank you again, Felix. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been speaking to candidates running for the Hitchin Constituency in the upcoming general election. We hope to learn more about their platforms, visions for our community, and plan to address the key issues that matter to us most. Many of the questions asked today have been drawn from a recent ONS survey of the key things people worry about most. So let's get started. Joining me today is Bim Afolami, representing the Conservatives.
How are you, Matt?
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Welcome, Bim. Thank you
No
for
problem.
being here.
No problem.
Let's start by getting to know a little bit more about you. Could you tell us about your background?
Okay.
What motivated you to run for this in what is a new constituency, interestingly?
Thanks, Matt. Look, bit about me. I grew up in Surrey and Berkshire. My dad's a doctor. He's a consultant, anaesthetist in West Hertfordshire. My mum's a pharmacist locally. But we always grew up actually in Surrey and Berkshire. Went to Eton College, went to Oxford. I worked in the City of London, first as a corporate lawyer, then in restructuring and strategy at HSBC, where I was what's called senior executive, like a senior vice president, that sort of thing. And then I was elected as Member of Parliament for Hitchin and Harpenden in 2017.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now let's dive into some key issues that our community and indeed the country are facing. So the first one, inevitably, is cost of living. Many families in Hitchin are struggling with the rising cost of living. Food prices seem to be rising at an alarming rate still, whilst we are being told that the inflation is under control. What new measures would you propose to help alleviate these financial pressures?
Good question. And over the last year, I've been a minister in the Treasury, so I think about this not just locally here, but I think about it, as a national level as well. There are three main aspects to this. The first, as you mentioned rightly, is rising prices, inflation. Because of COVID and the war in Ukraine, globally, particularly in Western countries, but more broadly, that sent inflation through the roof because of energy, in particular, which drives, and energy prices drive the prices of most other things, right? In addition to this, and there's a technical point, but I think it's interesting, in addition, because of the strength of the dollar compared to most other currencies, particularly the pound, the euro, and others, and energy, oil being priced in dollars, that exacerbates your inflation problem, yeah? So what does that mean? Those rising prices impact on everyday families here in Hitchin, and I should have mentioned earlier on, we live in a village in North Herts with my three boys. We've lived there for many years. Not just in the town of Hitchin, but the surrounding area, right? How are we dealing with this? One, bringing inflation down is the first step to getting prices under control, yeah? So they don't rise as fast. And the Prime Minister, and you can say what you like about the Prime Minister, when it comes to numbers and the economy, this guy really knows his stuff, and I've worked with him very closely. That is really important, bringing inflation down, which is now it's about 2%. Interest rates we expect to come down, and the market expects to come down later this year. So that will all have an impact on prices not going up by anything like what they've done the last couple of years. But there's a bit of a lag time. Secondly, how do we deal with that? And how do we deal with it for working people? It's to give them more money at the end of the week, end of the month. That's why we've cut national insurance by £900 for your average worker. In our manifesto, we propose to cut it again to something like £1,250 for your average worker, off compared to where they otherwise would have been. That's really important because that is literally more money at the end of the week and month, right? That's over £1,000 more in your back pocket or in your pocket more generally. That really matters to a lot of people. And I suppose the last thing I'll say is, how else do we deal with this? Bit more of a long-term thing, but I think particularly focused on this area. We've got a lot of beautiful farmland in this area that is high-quality arable farmland. We need to make sure we don't lose too much of it for solar farms, and other things that are not about producing food. And a shift in policy, which we've started over the last couple of years, but we'll hopefully continue to make sure we grow more of our own food locally, will also help bring inflation down, so we have to import less.
Do you think that it's fair that the price of energy derived from solar or wind farms should be priced in line with a barrel of oil?
So it's priced with gas, right? So gas is what drives the electricity price. It's not fair insofar as that is just how it's always been done. The difficulty is changing that is actually quite complicated. We've started the process of changing that, and it's a very complicated process through the electricity market. My colleague Claire Coutinho is doing that right now, so that you end up with a more variable price. But let's be clear, when it comes to energy, we have in this country decarbonized faster than any country in the G7. Any. France, Germany, Italy, United States, Canada, we are greener than all of those countries in terms of our energy mix. So we've done a good job, but we obviously need to go further, but the job's not complete.
So again, should there be some change to how the energy price is calculated? If we are
of course.
We're relying on countries producing oil or gas, such as Russia and the Middle East, who can effectively control the output of gas and oil, and therefore put the price up. If we're getting that energy locally via renewable, should there be a sort of split, or is it being looked at, that kind of thing?
So,
or are we just hoping that...
So we are going through the process, as I said, of changing that so that we have more variable energy prices. But it is more complicated than what you set out, because in essence, the global energy price, right? Oil, there's a global oil price, there's a global gas price. Those things drive so many of the inputs required in order to build a wind farm, for example. Do you see what I mean? So it is very, very complicated. The fundamental point you make, though, is should we benefit from having more homegrown renewable energy? The answer to that is yes. It's one of the reasons why we're going through the process of, we've got some of the biggest wind farms. We've got the biggest offshore wind farm in Europe, transferring that energy down to the south of the country where it's needed. We're going through the process of building those pylons and getting that done. That's really, really important so that we can benefit from that.
Okay, thank you. Excellent, thank you very much. Now we'll move to question 2, which is NHS.
Oh God, we're only on question 2. I'm sorry, my answers are too long. I'll shorten them.
We'll be okay, don't worry. I'll soon hurry you on. You'll soon get bored. Question 2, NHS and healthcare. 85% of people are concerned about the NHS. What are the plans to improve healthcare services, reduce waiting times and address staffing shortages, and indeed encouraging people to work within the NHS?
So waiting times first. It's deal with the backlogs. How do you do that? Hire more doctors and nurses. We've done that actually. We've got 10% more doctors, 12% more nurses since 2019, right? So we do have more nurses and doctors in the system. The problem, as my parents know, and many other people, anybody watching this will know, is it's not just about hiring people, it's retaining them, right? So we've really got to do a lot better on that. How are we going to do that? We need to make it easier for people to train and cheaper for them to train. I'm really keen that we should look at innovative ways of making sure people stay longer in the system, by maybe looking at things around student loans and various things to make sure people stay longer. But also, we've just got to listen more to members of staff in the NHS when they want things in order to make their lives easier, shift patterns, where their partners or husbands and wives may be working. These are all things that don't tend to cost very much money. They can have a huge benefit. I remember when I was growing up, my dad used to be able to work nights, and he'd work 80, 90-hour weeks when he was a junior doctor, and he would often sleep out of the hospital, right? We need to bring those sorts of things back. Some hospitals do it, by the way, and I know that, having been at the L&D and various other local hospitals, and indeed the Eastern region more broadly, I know that some are doing things like that. But making it easier to be a member of staff is really, really important. You mentioned waiting times. What were the other points?
Appointments at GP surgeries, where you may have a surgery that might be not being managed in the most effective manner, where there may be not the incentive for those managers to be there. Many times.
So look, what's basically happened on GP surgeries is that after COVID, during COVID, a lot of the work patterns of how GPs operated changed, right? It became remote, became online, became over the phone. Very few people coming into surgeries for the reasons that we remember. After COVID, frankly, GP surgeries maintain much more of that way of working. That is the fundamental reason for the change in work pattern. It was COVID. Now, that is not the same thing as the core problem, which is numbers. Right? We need more GPs. We need more GP surgeries. That's the fundamental thing we need to do. Two ways in which we do that. In this area, I've been working with the Integrated Care Board, who are the people who in the system who effectively allocate that primary care funding, working with them to get new GP surgery, both in North Hart and in central beds, Stopford, Narsey in particular. So working with them, they've accepted that particularly in central beds bit of the constituency, there is, we have a very, very high ratio of people to GPs, right? Very, very high compared to almost anywhere in the country, right? So that needed accepted. And when the election was called, earlier than I thought, when the election was called, I was in the process of firming up plans to do that. Obviously, since the election's been called, it wouldn't be appropriate for them to develop those with me. But on 5th of July, I look forward to working with them on that.
Okay.
And more broadly on GP surgeries, what we also need to do is we need to incentivize more people to want to become partners in GP surgeries. What we used to have, and I grew up, as my dad, I grew up just knowing dozens and dozens of GPs. People wanted to be partners. Now there are fewer people who appear to want to do that, and they want to be more salaried. That changes the way in which you can allocate GPs across the country. So again, we need to look at the model and see how do we get more people to want to say, for example, I grew up, say, in North Hertfordshire, I'm moving to Whitwell, and I want to set up a practice in Whitwell, and I'm going to be that hub person for 30 years who the community gets to know and trust. That's what we need to be doing.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
No problem.
We'll move to question 3 then, which is the economy. The broader economic situation is a concern to 68% of the population. What strategies do you have, new strategies do you have to address inflation, unemployment, economic stability, those kind of things? Obviously, we're working towards, you're telling me we're working towards bringing down, or brought down inflation, but bringing down interest rates and those kind of things. But what strategies do you have which would change from what we're currently doing?
So look, and I won't repeat all the stuff about inflation because you heard it, but to some degree, don't trust anybody when it comes to the economy who says they've got something whizzy and new, right? There's nothing new. We know what drives economic growth, okay? We know what that is. That is high skills, good infrastructure, high investment, both private and public, right? And low taxes, okay? That's what we know. On the low tax side, I talked about personal taxes. People often say, why are you cutting national insurance? This isn't out of some sort of ideological thing. It's that cutting national insurance increases the supply of labour to the market. What that means is you increase the size of your economy. And the Office of Budget Responsibility, when we did our last budget, and I was working with the Chancellor on that, and they score that and say that improves the economy.
Okay.
Investment, more private sector investment. People who may be watching this, who run their own businesses, whether they be based in Hitchin or this area or somewhere else, we need them to invest more. What does that mean? It means expanding their footprint. It means hiring more people. It means buying more skills for their people so that their people can get better trained. That investment we've incentivized through various measures in the last budget.
I think that there's a situation with appropriate skilling as well. I think that there has been, from my industry, which has been IT for 37 years, I've seen the training that's happened to young people in schools to prepare them for IT. When I was at school, it was learning to program, to code, to understand the fundamentals of how computers and things like that worked. Whereas I saw my children going to school and being taught how to use Excel and Word, how to be a how to type in a word processor
Seems like a
is
bit of a
not
waste of time.
necessarily appropriate when they were completely at that time IT savvy anyway. It was a wasted opportunity.
Yeah. So I agree with that. I think the difficulty when it comes to IT is that it moves so fast.
Exactly. We have especially now, an AI summer or spring where it's the buzzword, and it's exceptionally urgent that we as a country grab that by the horns and get stuck into it, because there's opportunities there, isn't there? So.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not just that, right? So one of the things that I'm really proud of in the last few years as being Member of Parliament here is running an apprenticeship fair that we did at Hitchin Priory a couple of years ago. We had something like 300 kids who came. We had dozens of local businesses, and that's either Hitchin or North Hertfordshire, and a few from Stevenage.
Yeah.
So everything from small businesses on the Hermitage Road all the way up to MBDA, right? It's also making sure we have appropriate vocational skills. I'm not one of those people who believes it's always best for everybody to go to university, right? I think that the Tony Blair 50% of people must go to university is one of the biggest mistakes this country has made. Full stop. And what that has done is it's meant that there's a third of young people who 5 years having gone to university are not in graduate level jobs. That is breeding a huge amount of resentment because they've got all this debt. And yet we've got a third gap in the vocational skills in key areas.
Yeah.
What we need to be doing is more people studying at North Arts College doing fantastic vocational skills, which by the way means they'll be able to earn a lot of money. You know, these are not sink jobs. These are high quality, high skilled jobs. We need to incentivize much more of that. Get rid of the degrees that frankly are cheating young people. And if we can shift that, and in the manifesto we've got some policies as to how to do this, and I've been working on them over the last few months. If we can shift that, then I think a lot of the skills gaps that we see in this area can be fixed. And it can be done quite quickly, right? Like you can actually do that quite quickly. Within 2 or 3 years, you can see huge numbers of people going to the right vocational skills compared to doing degrees, which frankly, some of which are not giving people the graduate level jobs.
Okay. We now move on to question 5, crime. 59% of people it remains a major concern. What are your plans to improve personal safety, effectiveness of law enforcement in our community?
The new Police and Crime Commissioner, Jonathan Ash-Edwards, I know well. I've been working with him really closely. 2 particular areas I've talked to him about. 3 actually. One is antisocial behaviour, clamping down on it. He's got a new program called Operation Hotspot, which is a £1 million program, of which Hitchin is going to be one of the key areas, designed specifically to tackle antisocial behaviour, which is more visible policing, more CCTV, and really having a real high profile focus on antisocial behaviour so that we get it out of the town centre and other parts of the town. Part 1. Part 2, improve street lighting. Some people think this is like a small thing, but actually it's a massive, massive issue. Because if you're walking around at night, whether it be women or vulnerable people or anybody really, we need street lighting to be on longer. And so I'm working with the local councils to how do we do that? Because again, small thing, but can have a big, big impact on antisocial behaviour and broader safety. And the third thing is we absolutely need to deal with some of the road traffic problems around the town. I've been doing a lot of work with people on the Charlton Road, as you get on the edge of Hitchin, Grove Road as well. I've been doing a lot of work with people on that. Unless we can deal with some of these road traffic problems, a lot more people will be seriously injured or die. And as I say, anybody watching this who's worked with me on that knows how seriously I take it, know how much effort I put into it, and frankly, giving the council a kick to deal and act where they know things are dangerous, and not to rely on the excuse of, oh, well, there are other things in the county that are difficult. Well, I know there are other things in the county that are difficult, but this is mine, and we've put a huge amount of effort in. Charlton Road, we've managed to get the council to provisionally agree to drop the speed limit. That's only first step. We need to really improve that junction. It can be very, very dangerous. Grove Road, the issue is with HGVs going up to the industrial estate.
Areas,
When Judy Billing, the late Judy Billing, when she was alive, I worked very well with her and Ian Albert as well as to making sure we sort out the parking restrictions there. But also, I'm afraid, we're going to have to think about ways in which we can get HGVs going completely the other way to get into the industrial estate from the other way, because driving through the town of Hitchin, busy as it is not sustainable.
And I actually used to work in Wilbury Way many years ago, and it was a problem 30 years ago as well. So you unfortunately have an industrial area where its access is limited to two routes really, one through the town and one through Walsworth. But again, okay.
Yeah, I completely get
I see where you get that.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll move on to question 5. So we've done. Sorry, we'll move on to question 6, which is housing. Housing affordability and availability are significant issues. What measures will you take to address the housing crisis, particularly for young people who are trying to get on the housing ladder and for those on lower income?
2 main things. One is we need to change the rules around first-time buyers in terms of mortgage affordability. As my job in the Treasury is that of City Minister, Financial Services Minister, I spent a huge amount of time looking at this. Banks, after the financial crisis, became incredibly risk averse in terms of their lending. That really impacted first-time buyers. It didn't impact nearly as much people who already had assets. And I think talking to the Bank of England about how we can change that, which I have done, I think could make a big difference for first-time buyers. First-time buyers who can prove that they can afford it. I don't want to be, there's no point being reckless. But I do think there's scope there. Secondly, stamp duty. We have got a policy of permanently abolishing stamp duty for any first-time buyer buying a property under £425,000. Again, that will make a big difference to young people. And thirdly, we need to build more social housing. When I look at Churchgate, the centre of town, I know people have been talking about Churchgate for a very long time. I'm aware of that, and I know that it's going to be, something literally for 30, 40 years. People have been talking about the need to redevelop Churchgate. But now the council owns all of the freehold of that whole site, the market and Churchgate. That gives us a once in a 60, 70 year opportunity to reshape the centre of the town. And in addition to all sorts of other things we need to do, we need to have a lot of housing focused around younger people and older people, flats mostly I suspect, if not all, in the centre of Hitchin. We need to densify our towns, because if we can do that, we protect our beautiful green spaces, and that's where younger people in particular want to live. And I think that this opportunity that luck has given us should give us the opportunity to provide hundreds, if not thousands of homes right in the centre of Hitchin.
That's a very interesting point. It's been an issue for a long time. You did mention the price of the stamp duty ceiling of 425,000. The average house price in Hitchin is 425,000. So that would.
I want to be clear that I didn't do it. We didn't set it there precisely for that reason. I can't claim quite credit for that number.
But there we go. The next question was about roads, and you've covered it really by talking about Grove Road and Charlton Road and things like that. You've kind of, there is an issue with potholes, unfortunately, and the repair of them in a timely fashion, which I think comes in line with who's responsible for roads where they're not adopted yet by the local authority, so they're not taking responsibility. There needs to be something to address that, because that causes damage to people's vehicles, to people's bicycles. People might trip on them.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. So there does need to be, I think, perhaps.
Completely.
So there you go. Right, so we'll move on to community questions now. These are questions that have been submitted by members of We Love Hitchin. Thank you, members. The last time I looked at the camera with somebody, they actually turned to look to see if there was someone standing there. But there you go. So yeah, so the next questions are from our community. Andrea, a member of the community, has asked, how would you vote if there was a motion raised in Parliament to bring water companies back into the public sector and stop taking profits from this essential resource?
I would, as described, I wouldn't vote for it. I'd vote against it, though obviously it's difficult to know the detail, but on the face of it, I'd vote against it, and let me explain why. Water companies do 2 things. They obviously make sure they maintain the system of water and sewage, but they also invest in the infrastructure. If we took water companies entirely into public ownership, which is a perfectly legitimate aim for people want to do, we're going to have to find billions of pounds to do two things. One, we're going to have to find billions of pounds to buy the assets, buy the shares, billions, well over 10 to 15 billion.
Yeah, I heard figures of 65 billion.
So these are big companies, right? So fine, you have to find that money, okay? And to give you a context of how much that is, the defence budget is about 55 billion. So you're going to have to find that money. All right, so say you could do that. Then every single year, you're going to have to find 7-8 billion pounds to invest in maintaining the system. And that's all public ownership. Now, personally, I don't think that that's where we should prioritise public money. What we need to do is sort out the regulatory system so that the private companies and the shareholders that own water companies are forced to do the right thing with that private investment. And yes, they earn a decent return as long as they're doing the right thing. I don't think there's anything inherent with that. Our water bills, are relatively low actually compared to other countries. There've been problems with losing too much water. There've been problems with not building enough reservoirs. There are significant problems. Though interestingly, in this area, we've got a new reservoir just south of Hitchin that's being done. There are problems that need to be addressed. The question is, do those problems need to be addressed by spending 60, 70, 80, 90 billion pounds? Or do we need to address them using regulation? Do we need to address them by getting them to behave properly? My view is the latter, not the former.
I think that I did actually watch listen to a documentary about water.
Lucky you.
Yeah, it was incredibly interesting. But it was about the Northern Ireland, which is still government owned or government run.
Yeah.
And the general consensus was that they were probably no better off service-wise, quality-wise, than they would have been as private. I think the issue with Andrea is that because it's an essential resource that comes from the sky, should someone physically own it? But I think you have answers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfectly legitimate thing to say the government should own it. But I think you can't make policy as to what you'd love to happen. What you need to do is say, where am I?
Yeah.
And what am I trying to do? And in my view, we should be trying to get the best service to every single person in the country for water, and do that as efficiently as possible with public money.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll move on to Nyland and Lauren have asked similar questions, which I've kind of rewritten because they were radically different in their how they were given. But should we be providing arms or assistance in the Gaza war, and should we be recognising Palestine as an independent state?
I want to be clear, the British government doesn't provide arms to anybody, okay? British government does not provide arms to anyone. What the British government has done is it has broadly been supportive of Israel's right to exist, okay? And there's all sorts of other detail in that, and diplomatically it's moving all the time. But we do not provide arms as a country, right? It's not what we do. Arms companies do that. We don't do that.
But we fundamentally decide whether or not they.
Well, we haven't prevented people from doing that. We support Israel's right to exist. We support Israel's right to defend itself. But here's the thing: we are also, and I spoke to David Cameron about this several times over the last few months. We are very, very concerned about certain aspects of how Israel has conducted their offensive war, right, in Gaza. You can't not be concerned by that. And it's very difficult. Our Foreign Office diplomats, led by the Foreign Secretary, but obviously the diplomats are there all the time. We are playing a significant role to try and bring a sustainable ceasefire to realization. That's what we're trying to do. The difficulty, to be really frank, is the Israeli Prime Minister doesn't have to do what we want. I think that one of the difficult things is that it's difficult for people to appreciate that, yes, Britain is a very important country in the world, but Israel doesn't just do something because Britain says so. Even the Americans, who are more powerful than us in this scenario, the American presidents have very public disagreements with the Israeli Prime Minister. So what we can actually do is quite limited. And in relation to recognizing Palestine as a state, I think we should do that only in line with international law, that means the United Nations. There's no point Britain coming out unilaterally to do something. We're a permanent member of the Security Council. We should do that if that is the international consensus and done in line with international law, not just freelancing on our own, because actually all that does is it undermines the broader system which we have, which is the UN. So we've got to work with the UN, but if the UN as a whole collectively says, right, this is how we're going to deal with the problem, then that's of course what we should support. And in the past, we supported attempts where this is when Bill Clinton was president in the US. In the past, we very strongly supported the attempts to have a separate Palestinian, separate Israeli state. We are the most supportive, we're pretty much the most supportive European country on that, or one of them. But we can only do that in a sustainable way when a sustainable ceasefire.
Okay, thank you for that. Vanessa and Nicola have asked questions which are quite close to my own heart as a parent with children with special needs. Currently, children with special needs are being failed. There is not enough provision or indeed funding necessary to ensure SEND families get the support they need, not only in education, such as lack of space or appropriate pupil to carer ratios, but also in social care and the availability of agency staff or even respite for parents who are exhausted and in many cases completely alone. What could you pledge today that would provide some degree of support and hope for those in many cases that are desperate families and carers of the most vulnerable in our society, people without a voice of their own who rely on their representatives in Parliament to speak for them?
I mean, I can't, as being father to 3 boys and knowing how much work that is, I just can only imagine how difficult it must be for so many people. In fact, I don't have to imagine, I know, because I know lots of people in this constituency and elsewhere who manage this on a 24/7 basis, and it really is 24/7. It is a broken system to the extent that the system is overwhelmed by the number of kids that it has to look after. We're building 2 new special schools in Hertfordshire and many others around the country. I think it's 50 nationally, but we're building 2 in Hertfordshire. That will help alleviate some of the pressure for those who can't get places in the right school. We need to give them more support where it's a mainstream school as well. And I think the schools here actually do a very, very good job on that. But the schools will tell you, as they've told me, they need more resourcing to do that. We need to absolutely focus on that. In Hertfordshire as a whole, this is a broader problem because they've got very high levels of special need, very high numbers of special needs kids in the county. So it's not unique to this constituency. It's a broader issue. And I suppose the other thing we need to do is just to, I'll definitely support any attempts, thought through ways in which we can give more support to the parents, whether it be increased carers allowances for them, whether it be increased financial support. I think the numbers of people working in the system, you mentioned social care, is a real difficulty because the truth is we've just got a lack of people, full stop. Whether it be in this part of the system, whether it be in mental health, whether it be in the NHS, whether it be in community services, we need more people to see this as a career that they want to do. So that is another piece of the puzzle. We can build all the special schools we want, but we need to make sure there are people there who are qualified to work in them.
I think that paying teaching assistants at SEND schools minimum wage is acutely unmotivational for them to want to get into a career which is fundamentally caring for vulnerable children, and so it's literally rewarding, I think, people for doing what are. I think parents know how difficult, as you've already mentioned, it is to care for a special needs child or 2, but for somebody to be incentivized to care for children in a school or special needs setting, then they have to be incentivized to do those jobs in order to get the ratio of carers to pupils.
Yeah. No, look, obviously you're right. Yeah, you're obviously right. It's really, really hard if people are not paid very much to incentivize them. The only thing I would say is you can't get out of kilter. You've got to raise everybody who's doing a sort of similar job, whether it be in special needs or not, because what you can't do is increase in one part of that and then you end up with gaps elsewhere.
Yeah.
So look, I think anything we can do to pay people more is obviously a good thing.
I think the issue can be is because we have a minimum wage or a working wage, that's almost like a base that everybody's being paid at, and that can be perhaps you're paying somebody to do something that very, very, without insulting them, or menial, for the same amount of money that you'd be paying someone to do something far more responsible.
Yeah. And again, and this isn't looking down on anybody, but you will know that we've raised that national living wage, the minimum wage. We have raised that more than any other government by far. And in fact, the complaint that I get from some small businesses, not all small businesses, is they say, "You guys have raised the minimum wage so much, we can't afford to hire so many people." So there is a balance with that as well.
Yes, I understand. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that.
No problem.
Final part, we're nearly there. I wonder if you'd like to explain to our audience, address them via the camera, explain to them why they should choose you to vote on the 4th of July. So they...
Okay.
Yes.
Well, look, what would I say? I've been representing this area since 2017. I've got to know literally thousands of people here in Hitchin and the surrounding area. I live here. This is where our future is. This is where we're growing up our family. I care deeply about not just the town of Hitchin, but every single one of our villages in North Hertfordshire and indeed in the newer bits towards central Bedfordshire. 3 main reasons, if you're not sure who to vote for, why to vote for me. The first is I will be people's voice in Parliament, regardless of what the national picture is. If it ends up being a Labour majority, I will be an independent voice that won't just sort of allow central government to ride roughshod over our rights here. I will be people's independent voice, and have proved that, whether it be on areas like traffic noise on roads, whether it be on expanding the area of natural beauty across our beautiful Chilterns, whether it be on getting an independent, more GP surgeries and getting independent advice as to how to get that as fast as we can. I will be people's voice. Secondly, in Parliament, as a Treasury Minister, I can actually use my experience from here to make sure that we get better policy nationally. So I've worked very hard in areas of financial services, in the Treasury, getting tax cuts down on national insurance, using my expertise from business and learning from the people here, and bringing these problems to Westminster and in government as well, and in the upper reaches of the party. And the third reason is because I think that we've had a good record. One of the difficulties as a party, one of the difficulties over the last few years is we've basically faced 2 huge shocks. COVID and the war in Ukraine have been massive, and they have really, really impacted the finances of ordinary people and the finances of the government, to be frank. And that's why things have been so difficult. I am focused on growing our economy again. And we've done a reasonable job in the last year. We're now at that inflection point, that turning point where we can improve the economy. I'm backing small businesses. Small businesses are the lifeblood of Hitchin, all the retail businesses around here and many others. And I just can't bear to see that progress go to waste. And so not just locally here, but nationally, backing small business, I think is so important. And I'm afraid that the other parties, particularly Liberal Democrats or Labour, they don't believe in small business in the same way. They're going to load on so many taxes, and they will put the future of our economy at risk. So for all of those reasons and various others that I've forgotten, please vote.
Thank you, Bim, for sharing your insights with us today.
No problem at all.
We appreciate the time. We appreciate how busy you're likely to be. And thank you very much. We have a lot of members in the group who will be very interested in what you've had to say today. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in again. Stay tuned for more interviews as we continue this series. Once again, a massive thank you to Felix here at Farley's Hitchin for providing a fabulous venue. It's amazing. I love it in there. Please do visit. What's your web address again? Sorry.
Just Farley's Hair Salon.
Farley's Hair Salon.
That's it.
Just find it.
You'll do a search for Farley's Hair Salon online, and you'll find out how you can come here and have your hair cut. style. Also remember, your engagement and questions are vital to the process. Please continue to share your thoughts and comments on this post in our Facebook group, We Love Hitchin. And remember to keep comments and discussions respectful and courteous. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.